Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Naomi Casiro. I'm a physiotherapist and the owner of NeuroFit BC and NeuroFit Academy. I also founded the FMF treatment paradigm for functional movement and falls training, and I'm here to talk to you today about falls treatment. So I've come to you today with my top 5 tips for falls treatment and one extra bonus at the end. So let's get started. So the first thing I want you to know about falls and falls treatment is that it's actually made up of 2 parts. There's falls prevention and falls training. When we talk about falls prevention, we're talking about all the things we do to try and prevent a fall. Those are things like exercises for strengthening, balance, gait, endurance, all those different areas, and can also include things like protective equipment. So maybe hip protectors or grab bars in your bathroom or in your shower. Falls training is understanding that even when we do all our preventative measures, sometimes people still fall. We know that if you look at the data globally, falls are still a major problem despite our best efforts at fall prevention. So we cannot ignore the second part of the puzzle, which is learning how to actually get up and down off the ground and fall properly to reduce the risk of injury. So that takes us to tip number 2, which is that how you fall matters. I want you to think about 3 important things when it comes to how you fall, and we'll show some examples of these in just a minute. The first is that you want to protect your head. The second is that we want to avoid breaking a bone at all costs. And the third is that we're going to work to carry our momentum and to dissipate force. These are things that we want to think about ahead of time because when you have a fall, you don't have time to think. We want to train these things into your system before that fall happens. So when it happens, it's ingrained and happens naturally. Okay, so let's talk about those 3 important points when it comes to falls training. I want you to remember that while I'm demoing these here today, I am in a safe environment with matted flooring. If you want to try these should be done under the guidance of a healthcare professional in a safe environment where they can help you learn how to do these activities safely. The first we talked about is to protect the head. When you are falling, we want to make sure that the head is protected and not going to hit the floor. In a backwards fall, that looks like tucking the chin in towards the chest and avoiding the head flying backwards. Not only does this protect the head, but it helps avoid that outstretched arm and extended spine, which can lead to fractures in other areas. So we want to tuck the chin. When we go down, we want to make sure that as we go down, the chin stays tucked and we don't get that extended head posture. If you're falling forwards, protecting the head most often means having your head turn to the side as you hit the floor. The second key point I made was that we want to avoid breaking a bone at all costs. That sounds simple, but it's not so simple in practice. The positions that people often land in going backwards are arms out here and on their hip, which risks a forearm fracture and or a hip fracture. And going forwards, the same concept where we land, arms are out, and you're risking a fracture in the forearms. Yes, other places, of course, can fracture as well, pelvic fractures, spinal fractures. We want to avoid all fractures at all costs, and there are a few ways to do that. When we're going backwards, we want to think about keeping our hands at 45 degrees. So we want to avoid this landing position where we are outstretched and landing in a locked posture. We want to think about reaching the hands to 45 degrees and practicing that position so we get out of that reflexive reach when we're going backwards. In coming forwards, we want to think about taking our momentum through to the floor. So avoiding landing in an outstretched arm posture and rather carrying our momentum through the forearms down to the floor, turning our head sideways as we discussed. The third point I made, and this is a really important one, was that we want to carry momentum and dissipate force. When we're going backwards, you saw that my hands landed palm down with my forearms to the floor when I rolled back, and that's an important way to help dissipate the force. You also saw that I was rolling. My spine was rounded, my chin was tucked. I'm dissipating the force and I am carrying my momentum so that I'm not landing and stopping abruptly and having all the force directed into one or two joints. When you're going forwards, and you're falling, if you have a moment to think, or in your training, what you want to think about is actually reaching out like you are trying to catch the floor versus trying to stop yourself with the floor. That way you land and you absorb the pressure right away, go straight down to the chest. Or in an ideal world, if we're falling to our belly, we want to actually fall to our forearms so they can dissipate some of that force as well. The other great way to do this is to practice rolling, so we can actually roll sideways or at an angle. Again, we want to think about carrying that momentum. So instead of falling sideways and landing on a hip, we're going to continue that momentum, rolling all the way over to our side. Okay, so we are on to tip number 3, which is that exercise is the answer when it comes to falls treatment. It's just not as general as you think. All exercise is good exercise, but let's see if we can be a little bit more specific. We know that with Parkinson's, intensity matters. We really want to make sure that in your exercise routine, intensity is built in. And that might look like, instead of going for a casual walk, you do some interval training where you're going hard for a short period and then easy, and then hard and then easy. Or maybe you add some hills into your walking routine, or a set of stairs, or some squats. Something to increase the intensity of the activity you're doing. The other thing that's really important when it comes to falls treatment is including functional global movements in your training. These are multi-joint, multi-planar movements, and when I teach them, I categorize them into 6 basics and 2 bonuses. So we have push, pull, power, squat, hinge, and lunge. And then as our bonuses, we have core and carry. So I'll list those up here for you guys, but we want to think about what are the daily tasks that you actually want to be able to do better. Do you want to be able to lift a suitcase up into the overhead compartment of the plane? Do you want to be able to pick up your grandkids? Do you want to carry heavy bags of groceries? Is there a sport that you're trying to play? What are you trying to accomplish? And we want to make sure that we are really specific about what tasks those are and how we can integrate those tasks or the components of them into your training. So this takes us into tip number 4, which is that when you are thinking about prevention, you want to think about training the challenges that actually challenge you. Again, this is the same concept to some degree as functional movement training. You want to look at your life and think about, where are the environments where I have the most challenge? If I am practicing my balance just by standing on one leg or standing with one foot in the other, in front of the other, how does that relate to my daily life and what I'm actually having difficulty with? Am I having trouble opening the fridge and stepping backwards, or stepping sideways to pick something up in my kitchen? Am I freezing and stuttering when I'm going around corners? What's actually happening, and how can I train those specific skills? If you are having trouble opening the fridge and stepping backwards, and that's when you tend to find you're off balance, then we need to train in your routine practicing pulling and also having to step at the same time. We need to think about how you can learn to step backwards properly with your shoulders in front of your feet so that you don't feel like you're going to get retropulsive and tip backwards. We want to train the challenges you are having. Tip number 5, gait matters. Your walking and how you walk matters. Did you know that if you look at the data, the place that people by far fall the most is just in walking, not on slippery floors or ice, just walking in their day-to-day lives. So how you walk and your stability and capacity in walking really matters. I'm going to teach you 3 important things that I see really commonly in the clinic that we can work on right away when it comes to gait in Parkinson's. Okay. One of the things that I see over and over and over again in the clinic with my Parkinson's patients is that they really struggle to stack their weight over each leg evenly in walking. What does that mean? Well, when you're walking and you're off balance, people tend to start to shuffle. We know that that's a symptom of Parkinson's generally as well. So if you combine that with being off balance, there's probably a high chance that you're taking smaller, shorter steps and not actually shifting your weight side to side. When we're walking, it's important to get our weight up and over one side so that we actually have balance and strength to free the other leg to move in space. If we don't do that, then we risk tripping, we start to get into our freezing and festinating, and it just puts you at higher risk of a fall overall. So what I want you to think about when you're walking is if you had a string pulling you up tall in the center, and you were a little marionette doll and somebody was controlling you, as you step onto your right foot, you should be coming up and over onto the right side, not staying centered. When you come up onto your left foot, you should be doing the same thing. Another good way to think about that is leading the movement with your hips. So as you step onto your right, push your hip forward and ground down through your heel so you're really strong and stable on that right side before you switch to stepping and doing the same thing on the left. The next thing that we use a lot in clinic, and that is a really, really good way to very quickly improve your walking, is to count your steps and then try and reduce them. So I want you to pick a stretch, maybe a block or a hallway in your house, and count every foot when you walk. So you're going to walk that hallway or that block, and you're going to count every step. Then you're going to go back to the beginning, and let's say you did it in 10 steps. You're now going to try and do it in 9. If you can make it in 9, you're going to try and do it in 8. And if you can make it in 8, you're going to try and do it in 7. What you will notice is as you try and increase your power and reduce your steps, you'll start to push off your back toes, you'll start to use your arms more, and you'll start to kick into those big those big bum muscles that help propel you forward. So this is a really quick and simple trick to improve your gait in a very short period of time. And you can do this when you're out walking around the block or doing any kind of walking activity. Our third walking tip is that you don't only ever walk forwards straight in life. Again, we really want to take your training and translate it to what you do in reality. When you're walking around in daily life, you need to walk forwards. You need to be able to step backwards. You need to be able to move sideways. You need to move in all planes of movement. So don't only train your forwards walking if you want to be able to step in other directions and not fall down. Okay, it's bonus tip time. The bonus tip is to know your falls portfolio. When somebody comes into our clinic and we are treating them for falls or near misses or balance issues, one thing that we always do is build them a falls portfolio. We get as much information about them and their falls as we can so that we can start to understand and see patterns and treat accordingly. You can do this at home. I want you to log your falls or your near misses and start to think about, where was I? What was I doing? Where was my medication? Did I just take it or was I wearing off? Was I tired? Was it the end of the day? What position did I land in? Did I injure myself? What was the environment like? All those things become really important to tracking patterns. We know with Parkinson's that there are kind of classic falls patterns that happen. Retropulsion, so tipping backwards and getting that stumbling, often from a static stand. Freezing or festinating, trying to go around corners, when people are turning and their legs get crossed. We know there are patterns, and the more you can pick out your individual patterns, the better you can focus your exercise routine on the challenges you are actually having. If you are having trouble with retropulsion and that's when your falls are happening, you need to learn to fall backwards properly so that if you do go down, you're safe. You want to learn how to step backwards appropriately with your shoulders in front of your heels so that you can avoid that retropulsion whenever possible. You want to be able to set up your environment appropriately to reduce your risk of tipping backwards in the first place. So the more information we have, the more we can do, whether you are looking at treating it yourself or you have a healthcare professional on your team. Build your own falls portfolio so that we can treat the challenges you are actually having. Thanks for joining me today, guys. If you have more questions about falls or getting up and down off the ground, check out our second video where I will teach you lots of different ways to get up and down from the ground safely.